Bless the Lord, O my soul, O Lord my God, you are very great. I speak to you in the name of the living God, holy eternal majesty, holy incarnate word, holy abiding spirit. Amen. Can imagination save you? Can a vision of the awesome stop our questions, provide comfort in sorrow? Can a glimpse of the majesty of God lift us out of ourselves? Those are the questions at the end of the book of Job. That's the gamble that God makes arriving out of the whirlwind to answer Job's questions. Job, you remember him, that faithful, righteous man who has lived a blessed life, rich in land and livestock, surrounded by a large family, respected in the community, hale and hearty. Job who lost everything. Livestock stolen by marauders, burned up by a lightning strike, children killed by a tornado, his health ruined as he is covered in sores head to foot, so itchy that he uses a piece of broken pottery to scrape himself. Still, Job remains faithful. And then his friends show up trying to make sense of things. You must have done something wrong, Job, to deserve all this sorrow. What was your sin? That's when Job breaks, crying out he has done nothing wrong and that they are lousy comforters. Job never loses his faith. He never writes God off, but he does demand some answers, an accounting, an explanation from God for why a good man should suffer so badly. And that's when God enters the scene, which we hear today. Speaking out of the whirlwind, God provides a vision of God's power. God's not the handmaid of we humans, but the creator of all that is. God offers overwhelming images of God's glory and creation, making clear God's sovereignty, asking, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And then God challenges Job, can you speak to the clouds, asking rain to come? Can you cause lightning? Who was it who put reason in the minds of humans? Who created the lion with its instincts? We hear a short list of these kinds of questions in today's reading, but God goes on for quite some time. This all-powerful God holds up the stars in the sky, the planets in their courses. This God made Leviathan, that giant sea creature, just for the fun of it. This is the creator on whom we depend for our very breath, whose cosmic mind lies behind millennia of evolution, who caused tectonic plates to shift. In other words, Job, who are you to question me, the creator of the universe? Now, this is terrible pastoral care. But it's a grand vision meant to reorient us entirely. I mean, for sure, this is a terrible way to comfort someone. And I do not recommend this approach the next time you're with someone who is suffering. But it is good theology, a way to orient our lives, to correct our posture towards the universe. After all, God is God, and we are not. God is glorious, divine in majesty, beyond our imagination. God is our creator. We are the creatures. And we should stand in awe of God rather than treating God like some tame cosmic butler who's just waiting around eager to do our will. And that awesome vision of an abundant, untamable creation set spinning by a God beyond our imagining, well, that inspired the psalmist. Bless the Lord, O my soul. You set the earth upon its foundation, sings the psalmist, and then goes on to list all the beauties and wonders of the natural world, the lavish abundance of creation. The cedars of Lebanon in which birds build their nests. Mountains that were provided just as refuge for mountain goats. Stony cliffs made for rock badgers. Night so beasts can prowl. A day bound by a rising sun and a setting sun so that humans know when we're supposed to work and when we're supposed to rest. On and on goes the catalog of these mighty works until the psalmist finally exclaims, "How manifold are your works, O Lord." In both Job and the Psalm, we meet the God of all creation, not just of we humans. God overwhelming in power and creativity, lavish and abundant. We sometimes demand answers for our questions. Instead, God invites us into a wild adventure, a lush creation, unfathomable abundance. Rather than providing rules, be good, you get rewards, do bad, you're going to get punished, it turns out life is way messier than that. Rather than providing those kinds of rules, God is giving us amazement. God's not created us for tidiness and safety, but for awe and wonder and abundance. I learned a lot about awe and wonder, about the abundance of God right here at All Saints, sitting in that pew right there. When Bonnie cast a vision beginning one of her sermons this way: "It's a river, not a pie." It's a river, not a pie. And that line has rung in my ears ever since. Now, I would have sworn that sermon was given to kick off a pledge campaign, to convince us that there was more than enough that we could give without worry because, after all, it's a river, not a pie. But I did some checking around, and unfortunately for me, on this Sunday that is the kickoff Sunday for the pledge campaign, it turns out "It's a River, Not a Pie" was a sermon about the prodigal son and father, delivered on the fourth Sunday in Lent. So much for my memory. But it still works, because what God is trying to show Job, what the psalmist gives thanks for, is the amazing abundance of God, and that is what I learned here at All Saints, not just in Lent, but year-round. Because it's outrageous bake sales and green lining campaigns. Abundance is the communion of saints remembered in a canopy of brilliant colored flags flying overhead. It's a food pantry snaking from our front doors and right through the middle of our sanctuary and out through the back. Abundance is a sit-down meal where we all gather together. For God's love, God's grace, God's creativity, well, they aren't parceled out in small, finite pieces, but they rush on, an ever-flowing stream without end, distributed recklessly to you and to us and to all. That lesson was so ingrained in me here at All Saints that I tried to live into that river, not pie metaphor. I began taking seriously that I was not the one in charge. God was. And that God was greater than anything I could ask for or imagine. And that the best posture I could attempt to take in this world was one of wonder and gratitude. And so when one of you years ago, I won't name names here, but you can ask me after the service, when one of you here challenged me to tithe to the church, I swallowed hard and asked, voice cracking, "Is that before or after taxes?" "It doesn't matter," was the response. "Just choose one and do it." So I did, pledging 10% of my meager Catholic school teacher salary that year. Each week, I wrote my check with a trembling hand. And you know what? I became very aware then that I was not in charge, that I was living before a God way bigger than I am, that I was voluntarily placing myself into the hands of the living God, giving thanks to that one who was the source of all that I am and all that I have, friends and family, job and income, my very life, each breath I take. Now, time for a little truth. I bounced some checks that year. And the church was incredibly gracious. I learned that maybe I didn't have to start by giving away 10% of my income, but that I should lean into the abundant grace of God by giving more than was comfortable. Over the years, I made it to 10% and sometimes more. And yes, I now calculate that on my after-tax income. Most of it goes to the church, but a significant chunk goes to other places I love. A homeless shelter for families with children, faith-based community organizing, a shelter for homeless LGBTQ teens, and of course, to NPR. Who I give it to does matter to me. Feeling that I'm doing good matters as well. But honestly, each time I pledge, write a check, or more likely these days go online and sign up for monthly debit, I feel the joy of participating in God's inscrutable, mysterious, overwhelming abundance. I give thanks that I live in a universe created by a God I love, but that I truly do not understand. I participate in the wild joy of a life lived in faith where the answers aren't always clear, but amazement is the order of the day. Along with the beloved poet Mary Oliver, when it's over, I want to say, all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. All my life, I was a bride married to amazement. So, dear All Saints, here we go. Pledge season is here. I know it's awfully early, and we're promising that it will be fast and furious over by November 14th. You can hold us to it. You're going to hear about balancing the budget and from many good people who tell you why they give. You know, the usual. But I'll tell you something else. When you give away some of what you have, you are acknowledging the scary truth of our faith, that our God is bigger and wilder, more abundant and inscrutable than we can imagine. And God has lavished all of creation with God's abundant goodness and mystery. And our right posture is one of humility and amazement. This isn't a pledge campaign, but a testament to the amazing grace of God, the abundance of creation, the riskiness of generosity, to the love that is always, always a river and never, ever, ever a pie. and you're invited to the great adventure. Amen.